Hello and welcome to a review of The Silver on the Tree by Susan Cooper. It is the concluding book in The Dark is Rising. And once again, I've got another one of the lovely puffins with the Michael Heslop covers, which are so beautiful. Such good artwork. I'd hang Michael Heslop's covers on the wall framed in a second. Okay, so since this was book number 5 in the series of The Dark is Rising, which I've reviewed each book separately, I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say a few words on how much I enjoyed this book, which was significant. It's my favourite in the series, I think. As a conclusion should be, really. Then I'm going to talk about the series a bit. I personally feel like you can't really spoiler a book that was published in 1977 on a series that concluded with that book. But on the off chance that there's some people out there who are watching this and who plan on reading it and don't want to know what the ending is and can't foresee the ending and haven't read the Wikipedia and all the much media that is out there on the interwebs, on that off chance, I will right at the end say spoilers and talk a little bit about the conclusion. So the series overall is known as a positive one, so you know it's not going to end terribly, but throughout the series there's also this this poem that keeps going on, and there was a wonderful music video done of it that Captain Samuel shared with me, and I will try to add it below. So there's in this poem there's foreshadowing of the fact that the people who end up facing the dark, not all of them are going to return. Silver on the Tree, I think, has got... It was so beautiful to read. This is a puffin, and it's certainly not enormous, but it took me days because I spent a lot of time relishing the actual writing, the wordage, the craft that went into making it as beautiful as it was. And there is, I would say, a deep, abiding beauty in the writing itself, for itself. Also, what comes through is a love of the land, the sea, a connection with nature and trees and hills, and there's this emotive connection to the whole world and indeed the whole country, I would guess, of the United Kingdom. Susan Cooper herself was from the United Kingdom, though I think by the time she was writing most of this series she was living overseas. I believe she's Canadian, lived in Canada for most of her life, but the connection she had with the United Kingdom was enough to make this series feel quite beautiful. One thing that I think, yes, it's a very satisfying conclusion to the quest. You've got a bit of hero's quest, you've got a bit of hero's journey, you've got a bit of good versus evil happening. And I think that as a series, it's an unusual series because it's a puffin. It's published as a children's book, or what we'd call these days young adult, though I don't think that it called itself young adult back in the day. It doesn't conform to a lot of the standards that we would expect from a modern series these days. It feels like most series that you go into, they were plotted from the get-go. So you've got this story arch that goes throughout the books. And really it almost feels like the books are just ticking the boxes of where that story arc is going. And I'm not really criticizing that. I like the series that have got a story arc for the whole series, but individual story arcs for each individual book, so that every time you finish a book, you feel like you have achieved something, but that the whole story arc is worth waiting for. I like that. And you do have that a little bit here. Though in Oversea Under Stone, it was designed as a standalone and it finishes as a standalone. And in it, of course, we're introduced to the Drew children, who are normal children and who are co-opted into a hunt for King Arthur's Grail in Cornwall by their uncle Merryman, great uncle Merry. So that's Simon Drew, who's the eldest, Jane Drew, who's the middle one, and Barnabas Drew, or Barney, who's the youngest. And this one feels like a kid's book. It's a very satisfying kid's book and a very satisfying standalone. From 1964? No. 1965. Beautiful cover. Heslop again. Okay, a few years later, Susan Cooper expanded it into book number 2 with a much less cover, nice cover, The Dark is Rising. That is the second one, and the series takes its name from that because by this one, she's quite clearly designed the complete series and how it's going to end. In The Dark is Rising, we're introduced to Will Stanton. He is, though we don't know it at the beginning of the book, the 7th son of a 7th son, and on his 11th birthday, he comes into maturity as an old one, whereupon magic stuff starts happening. So the old ones that we're introduced to in this second book, and we learn eventually that Great Uncle Merry must be one, though he may or may not be more than that, could be either. They are ancient and they are kind of immortal. They are mortal in that Will has been born into the regular body of a regular boy, and for his first 11 years he didn't think he was any different from his brothers and sisters. But the knowledge of the old one matures in him when he reaches his 11th birthday, and he develops mystical and magical powers that are never over-explained. And one thing I really do love about the Dark is Rising series is how little things are over-explained. Instead of explaining or reiterating the same thing over and over again, which is a problem with some modern series and especially with young adult series, rather than that, a lot is left for the imagination, is not over-explained, and that leaves the author room to enter in so much information. This series has mythology out the wazoo, and it doesn't in any way try to remain conservative about which mythology it uses. You've got Celtic mythology, you've got Norse mythology, you've got English mythology, you've got magic grab bags from everywhere, and it's all tied up, I think, with the fact that Susan Cooper knew England and its magical, historical background so much that all the things that she loved, she just put in there. It's a very not contemporary and not modern way of doing things, but I think it's fantastic. I loved it. It's unusual in series that you see today, and because of that unusualness, it caught my fancy enough that I read it virtually all the way through. So after finishing the second one, I went on to the third one, Greenwich. Once again, one of those beautiful Heslop covers. And in Greenwich, we leave Will Stanton behind, kind of. We go back to Cornwall, where it all began with the Drew children. And in Cornwall, once again, Susan Cooper breathes life into an old mythology of the Greenwich. This concept has been used in a number of films and other books, but the idea is that you, over a particular night, a form of a human is built out of wickerwork, often very symbolic trees, as here, and is then thrown into the ocean as a sacrifice to the sea gods. And in Cornwall, in this particular village, Treswick, it's not a real village, but it's based on a real village, still a lot of people make their life from livelihood from the sea. And here, Jane Drew gets the position of being the only woman in the group, and she gets to see the Greenwich and forms a connection with that. But at the same time, Will Stanton has come to Cornwall as well at behest of Great Uncle Merry. The Drew children dislike him, they just think he's an intruder. But slowly his connection to the old powers and to Great Uncle Merry emerges, and by the end of it, Jane Drew at least has realized that he is more like Great Uncle Merry or Merry than he is like them. Now, in Greenwich, I think, is the one in which Susan Cooper really starts evaluating the different types of magic. We hear a lot about magic in The Dark is Rising, but it's specific old magic there. Now, in as much as I can tell, within the Dark is Rising sequence, Susan Cooper talks about three main kinds of magic. She's got the old magic, which is a powerful elemental magic, which encompasses the dark and the light, which are the good and evil surrogates, kinda. Are they good? Are they evil? Or are they just themselves? But the old magic has these two opposing forces, of which Will Stanton and Merriman Lyon represent the light, and then the dark keeps trying to seduce Will Stanton to it. At least they do at first in The Dark is Rising. By the Green Witch, you've got these temptations and trials are being thrown at the Drew children more. Now, as well as the old magic, in Green Witch we're introduced to the idea of wild magic. This is the wild magic of nature. Green Witch is part of the wild magic, not of the old magic of the two forces. And in Green Witch, Will Stanton and Merriman Lyons go down into the depths of the ocean to talk to Tethys, the spirit of the ocean, as it were, about the wild magic, which we learn is equal in strength to the older magic, but a completely different provenance, and not always terribly interested in the old magic and its concerns. It certainly doesn't take sides. Now then, we've got the high magic, and I have to say that by now I'm getting too many classification spirit systems in my brain, and I don't quite understand how she differentiates this in a way, but she does. So it's considered the most powerful magic, being entirely neutral of the cosmos. Spells of the high magic are used by the old ones in the Greenwich to be able to get down to Tethys, who is of the wild magic. They use the high magic to communicate between the old magic and the wild magic, and there's an awful lot of magics there. Now, the high magic is what is used in The Grey King, with an even more horrible cover. Sorry about that. This is book number 4, and in it we leave the Drews behind, and we have Will Stanton going back into Wales, where you have Will Stanton going to Wales. Say hello, Reapy Cheap. I could have been reading Narnia. I could have been reading about Reapy Cheap in Narnia, but no, instead I went for The Dark is Rising. So, in The Grey King, Will Stanton goes to Wales, where he's got relatives, and he befriends Bran Davies, who is a very unusual Welsh boy. And together they journey, and they use the high magic to obtain the harp of gold from a place where it is guarded. And once again, we learn that the high magic is neutral. It isn't on the side of the light, it isn't on the side of the dark. It does its own thing, and it remains neutral. This harp is then used by them to rouse the riders, and the riders, I've got to be honest, I'm never quite sure which of the magics they apply to. And while it sounds very confused and erratic when I describe it like this, in actual fact, it's actually very enjoyable. It's like if you're reading about a magical, mythological universe and everything is explained, that makes it sound superficial, a bit childish. I know there are people out there that like to have their magic systems and their world completely explained, and they are upset if they aren't. So for them, this book series is probably not going to be the best, because it isn't over-explained. But I quite like that feeling that there's the unexplained, that the magic is actually magical. It may be the source of everything that happens, but it isn't something that necessarily I, as a mere mortal, should expect to entirely understand. Susan Cooper does a wonderful job of juggling these magics and these magical items that need to be collected by the light before that final confrontation, which occurs in Silver on the Tree after the last item has been achieved. So the last item is a sword of crystal, and hang about, I've made some notes about this. And the sword of crystal is, or the crystal sword is called Erias, which I believe might be Welsh, and it is used to vanquish the dark in the final struggle. Now, in pursuit of it, we're back in Wales. This time, Will Stanton has gone to stay with his uncle, and he and Bran are looking for things. But in the meantime, Great Uncle Merry has brought the Drew children into a resort, also in Wales, and they all collaborate. Now, up until this last book, I think I at least was uncertain about who the actual people in the verse were going to be. When the dark comes rising, six shall... on the day of the dead, when the year two dies, must the youngest open the oldest hills. Through the door of the birds, where the breeze breaks, their fire shall fly from the raven boy, and the silver eyes that see the wind, and the light shall have the harp of gold. By the pleasant lake the sleepers lie, on Cadfan's way, where the kestrels call. Though grim from the grey king shadows fall, yet singing the golden harp shall guide, to break their sleep and bid them ride. When light from the lost land shall return, 6 sleepers shall ride, 6 signs shall burn, and where the midsummer tree grows tall, by Pendragon's sword the dark shall fall. And this is the one where by Pendragon's sword the dark did fall. But there's also another poem that's constantly referenced. 3 from the circle and 3 from the track will drive the dark away. And the 3 from the track are quite clearly from the beginning the 3 Drew children, Simon, Jenny, and Barnabas. But it wasn't until we were well invested in this one that I was entirely sure what the 3 from the circle should be. One, of course, had to be Will Stanton. It was quite obvious that Merriman Lyons was going to be one. He's kind of the orchestrator of the whole events. But till close to the end, I wasn't entirely sure if the lady wasn't going to be the third, but no, the third is Bran Davies. And by taking up the sword that was his heritage, designed for him, not sure about that, but by taking up the sword, they have the complete set of information and devices in order to drive back the dark, trying desperately not to spoil it here. So of the artifacts of power that are mentioned in that poem, you've got a large number of ones. You've got a set of 6 circles, 6 signs, each made of a different material, and Will achieves those in The Dark is Rising, number 2. You've got the Grail and the information on the Grail. Now that the Grail is found in book 1, but it's only really interpreted in the information given to them in book 3. So that was good. It's mentioned that the markings on the Grail are a writing system similar to Ogham, long lost, and it's translated using a key. In the 5th one, you've got the Harp of Gold, which they achieved by answering 3 riddles, which is very much like more Middle Eastern mythology, where the Sphinx asks riddles that have to be answered in order to pass. And then you've got the crystal sword. There we go. It was commissioned by the light. It was crafted in a magical lost land, and it can do some pretty wild stuff. Okay, this review is as all over the place as this series is, which is fine. So Silver on the Tree. We've got Bran Davis and Will Stanton climbing the mountain. Will Stanton has a horn, the sort you blow on, not drink from, that he achieved in a previous adventure. And they're on the mountain, and that calls to the 3 Drew children who are also there. And together they unlock some information. Jane unlocks it by the lady's will, and they find some stuff, and eventually Will and Bran fly out to this lost land. Apparently there's this marvelous magical city, mythological city in what is now the Bay, and they can go there, but the Drew children remain. As the Drew children remain, the dark tries to target them and distract Merriman Lyon from assisting the other two from the circle who are on the land trying to achieve the sword, but the Dark's efforts are in vain. There's some marvelous storytelling in this. There is one portion of it where Jane and the other two, the Drew boys, are being talked to, guided around the old town in Wales by John Rowland. John Rowland is a normal man. He isn't one of the old ones, but he knows they're doing something important, and he does what he can. He doesn't want to know what the battle is, but he'll do anything that he can to support them. And he's talking to Jane and the boys about what that town looked like in his father's day. His father was a sailor who drowned at sea. And all of a sudden, Jane and the boys and John Rowland slipped through into the past where Rowland's father was just a small boy, and we get conduct around this Welsh village in the sea, the methods that they used to use to build fishing vessels, the whole atmosphere of the town, and that was fantastic. I loved that little bit. It did, however, make me doubt some level of accuracy. Now, my understanding is that Welsh was in danger of being a dead language for quite some time. It's been resurrected from that, and part of the reason that it went close to extinction was that English schools and English management refused to allow people to use it. So when Jane and the others slip back into the past and everyone's talking Welsh, I'm wondering how accurate that is. People my grandparents' age, I don't think many of them learnt Welsh. They certainly weren't allowed to use it in school. There's stories about people being birched for speaking Welsh, their own native language, in schools. So I'm not sure how accurate that is, but it is a beautiful sequence, whether it's true or not. Okay, so Welsh mythology, there's a small bit of Norse mythology too. Oh yes. When we're talking about the Dark, in The Dark is Rising, we first meet the Dark Rider, which sounds very J.R.R. Tolkien, and perhaps justifiably so. Because Will Stanton is first encounters the Dark Rider in the smithy of Wayland Smith. He has, without knowing it, slipped through into a different past. And Wayland Smith, who is himself a mythological figure, is there shoeing a horse for the Dark Rider. Now, the Dark Rider is at one stage later given a specific name, which I wrote down here somewhere. Mythlian? The interesting thing about that name was that is a name that is known to be associated in Norse mythology with Loki, the ice giant. Jotun? I'm probably mispronouncing that terribly. So really, once again, you've got that tie into a completely different type of mythology. There's other things. It talks about the Chiltern Hills in England. The very names of our protagonist. Will Stanton is the Stanton. The Drew children are Drew. There is a place called Stanton Drew in England, where it's the second largest set of standing stones. And it's just like everything in this series is magical, even if not actually magical. It's magical in how much mythology and amazing knowledge has been combined to create this beautiful story. Okay, there's probably a lot more that I could say about this. Oh, the Wayland the Smith actually came from Germanic mythology. You've got the heritage of Bran seems to go back to the Pendragon, which is how he comes to bear this sword. And we find that he probably was the true son of King Arthur, who has been brought forward to be reared there. There's just stuff everywhere. It's marvelous. And it's beautifully written. In this particular book, as well as the poem, which I already read to you, hope that didn't hurt too much, there's one particular point which I read in page 225, and I read it and I stopped and I went back and I thought to myself, this is just pure literature. It's beautiful. So how does it go? The small hieroglyphs written by the feet of the birds on sand. Stunning. Anyhow, I've probably rambled about this quite enough. So I'm going to mention a couple of spoilers about the end of Silver on the Tree. If you're just about to start this series and you think it will bother you to know what happened, probably go away now. Thank you for watching. Follow the link that I am going to post below to the rather beautiful song. It's very folksy, if you like that sort of thing. I feel like this series really deserves a really strong metal music because it's a pretty metal series. But the folksy one also sort of meets some people's expectation of it, I'm sure. Thank you for watching. And the spoiler is, the ending is really quite spectacularly understated. Now, a lot of this book is understated. The writing is far from what you'd get from a modern young adult series where you've got dark against light, where you'd have battles, where you'd have 13-year-olds who are suddenly the most amazing, skilled swordsmen in the universe. This is subtle. The sword is used more as a symbol, like you would in the tarot, perhaps, rather than as an actual battling sword. And at the end of the day, the light wins, of course. We knew that was going to happen. But it wins again, subtly, by the will of the individuals, by small delicacies. And the end of it is that both powers are driven from the earth. So the power of the light leaves and the power of the dark leaves. The light has vanquished the dark, and it won't have any more chance to affect humanity on the world. And the light leaves at the same time, leaving humanity to our own devices. It's a type of result that you don't see anymore. And I thought it was very well done. So basically at the end of this, all the old ones withdraw, and the only old one left on Earth is Will Stanton, who's going to be there as a guardian to make sure that nothing ever occurs. And if this was a modern day series, they'd probably be already planning series number 2, when Will has to call back the circle. But this feels complete. It feels like an ending. And the idea of humanity being left to their own devices for good or ill is, I think, a rather excellent ending to this series. The other exception to this is Bran. Bran, who is the son of the Pendragon, has grown up in the modern era, well, modern for the 70s at least. And when he's offered the chance to leave on Arthur's boat, Pridun, and sail with King Arthur, while he's terribly tempted at the end, he says, no, this is my place, this is my home, I'm going to stay here. So there's an element of the person turning from a manifest destiny of exceptional to have just an ordinary life. And that's a theme that's been used in quite a few different series, which I really loved. So overall, an excellent series. I am sure I'm going to think of things later which I think, gee, I wish I'd have mentioned that. It is so good. It is really, really good. I am so glad that I've read it again. I'm so glad that I was able to get, with the assistance of the library, the ability to read them all in sequence, more or less at once. This is the closest that I've come, I think, for years to reading a whole series at once without any breaks. And I think probably the only series I can regularly do that with is Lord of the Rings. Thank you for watching. Read good books.